Ever since he was a little boy, Jacob's only dream had been to grow up and drive a truck. All his dreams were of spinning the wheel of such a car, driving across the expanse of his homeland. Jacob's childhood room, almost from birth, was filled only with toy trucks of different brands and colours. The boy's family lived in a small town in the north of the country, where there was beautiful nature. When the summer and fall came, he grew older, and he often went with his parents to the woods, where there were a lot of mushrooms and berries. Most often they went there with his father, and at home his mother would process and gather crops, making all kinds of preparations. When the winter came, they liked to go skiing together in the snowy woods for a long time. Jacob loved to watch the snow sparkle and crunch on the track on a frosty sunny day. He and his father had a favourite slide on the outskirts of town, where many children would gather in the winter and go sledding. As he got older, Jacob didn't change his dream of becoming a truck driver, and became even more interested in the profession. When many of his classmates at his high school graduation party couldn't say where they would go next, he had already signed up for a driving course and was eagerly awaiting the start of classes. The boy literally plunged into his favourite business with his head, and did everything with joy and soul. So quickly he mastered the profession of his dreams. Jacob soon could not only drive any distance, but knew and loved cars almost to the smallest detail. His parents couldn't get enough of their son, whose eyes lit up when he talked about the business he loved. They always believed in him, because whatever he had in mind was always accomplished. Knowing their son, they were sure that he would soon be successful in this as well. After graduating from the course, Jacob immediately found a job. When he climbed into the cab of a trusted truck for the first time, he couldn't believe his happiness. Now he wasn't pulling the toy car by the rope as he had done when he was a child. He was a part of this huge machine. The boy was happy to operate the car. It seemed to him that there was a whole other world in this cab, a special and mysterious one. But at first, of course, he was not allowed to drive the truck himself. He was assigned to an apprenticeship with Peter. That was the name of a trucker with more than 20 years of experience. He, at first, was somewhat distrustful of Jacob, even muttering on the first day, "Oh, these inexperienced young men. I teach them for half a year and all they can do is break techniques." But then after watching the guy at work, Peter was surprised at his eagerness to learn and learn all the tricks of the driving business. Usually an apprenticeship could last up to 6 months, but in Jacob's case, he was easily sent on a solo trip in a month. In a very short time, he became a true professional in his field, and the management of the convoy where he worked constantly set an example of the young worker. He had no fines or breakdowns. The flight always went smoothly, without delays and force majeure. He would take any direction and drive any distance. He was paired with Charlie, who was 7 years older than him. They transported the most diverse cargo from one city to another, driving in different regions. The back could be appliances or building materials, household chemicals or something from groceries. Regardless of the cargo, Jacob enjoyed every voyage and destination. He always went to work with joy and returned in the same high spirits. Only one thing overshadowed his parents. Their son remained unmarried. Although once, happiness was very close, but crumbled into small pieces like crystal. Jacob had been dating Amanda for almost 6 months. A very, as it seemed, pleasant girl. He met her by chance at a bus stop when he returned from a regular flight home. He was at once attracted by the slender brown-haired girl, and he asked her out. Surprisingly, the stranger agreed and it was very easy to talk to her. After a month, they rented a separate apartment to live in together. Jacob, on his way to work, was now in a hurry to return to his beloved. Amanda worked as a nurse at the clinic and always seemed to be waiting for his return. but it only seemed that way. Jacob had already wanted to propose to the girl and legitimize their relationship, but one day the flight was moved to a closer city, and he returned home much earlier than expected. Determined to surprise Amanda, he himself was unpleasantly surprised. When he returned at midnight, Jacob saw some man sleeping in his bed with Amanda in his arms. Jacob jumped out of the apartment without even listening to what his ex-lover was trying to say for herself. He couldn't remember how he'd made it to the nearest park and sat on a bench with his arms around his head until morning. He couldn't believe what had happened. After all, Jacob had been ready to marry her, dreaming of having a bunch of kids, and then this betrayal. But all is possible to survive when you have a favorite business. He began to work almost without days off, begging the leadership to give as often as possible and further flights. In time, the pain of betrayal subsided, and everything went back to normal. One time he went on a trip alone. His partner took the day off on the occasion of his anniversary. Some building materials needed to be moved. Jacob had driven in that direction before, and liked the scenic views on the quiet stretch of highway. There was always very little traffic, and he loved to watch the beauty of the woods flashing by outside the window with quiet music. On this trip, everything was going on as usual, until he saw something big and dark right by the outmost lane of the road. Slowing down, he tried to make out a spot that looked like a boulder. Immediately he braked sharply. There was a huge dog sitting right on the curb, barking loudly. After stopping the car, Jacob jumped out onto the road, gently approaching the dog. The dog, as if to let him know to follow him, began barking and jumping towards the woods. At that, Jacob saw so much grief and pain in the dog's tear-filled eyes that he followed without hesitation. Not far away behind the bushes lay an elderly man. The dog ran to the poor man's body and started howling shrilly, as if crying out for help. Jacob immediately felt for a pulse. It was faint, but still a sign that the man was alive. He dialed the ambulance's number and told them the mile marker he was at, so he waited for the ambulance to arrive. Fortunately, the nearest village was not too far away, and the doctors arrived on short notice. The old man turned out to be a local ranger. Apparently, he was making his rounds. A backpack was on the ground beside him, and an axe hung on the side of his belt. Jacob helped the doctors carry the stretcher to the road, where the ambulance remained, and sent the man to the hospital. As the ambulance disappeared around the corner, he looked at the dog and said, "Well, poor boy, let's go. You can be a trucker while your owner is being treated." He decided that the dog alone might be lost, and he would at least take care of the dog for the time being. As they approached the truck, the dog began to wriggle from paw to paw, as if begging to get in. Jacob opened the cab, and the dog stood hesitantly at first, sniffed the steps, and jumped straight onto the passenger's seat. The rest of the way, the dog sat almost motionless. Staring into the distance, it seemed to be thinking about something sad, and occasionally whimpering pitifully. Jacob assumed the poor dog was whining for his master, so he patted him on the withers and said, "Well, don't grieve, my friend. Don't worry, my friend. Once your old man is cured, you can roam the woods again." He was sure the dog had understood, and soothingly curled up with his eyes closed. 5 days later, Jacob was sent off on the same route again, and he decided to check on the rescued man. The first thing the man asked about was Jim, the same dog. When he heard that the dog was doing well and was now in Jacob's care, he smiled happily. Harry, the forester's name, was terminally ill, and the doctors said he wouldn't live more than a month. As Jacob sat beside him, his grandfather told him in a low voice that he considered himself a hereditary forester. All the men in his family watched over the woods, so he too, when the time came, began to guard the forest. For almost 30 years he had kept the whole forest in order. Vasily knew literally every bush and every tree. He picked Jim up as a little puppy during one of his rounds. The little puppy was sitting, orphaned, whimpering by the body of a dog killed by someone. Most likely, hunters mistook the grey dog for a wolf and shot it. It was difficult to determine its breed. It resembled a sheepdog in some way, but certainly not a purebred. The old man dug a hole near the pine tree and buried the dead dog. To prevent predatory animals from digging it up and tearing it apart, he placed a boulder on top. The woodsman took a puppy with him and raised a faithful friend and guard. The day Jacob found the old man, Harry was out on his rounds with Jim, but he suddenly collapsed, fainting. No one knows what would have happened if the faithful dog had not brought a rescuer. Jacob asked, "Should I let someone in the family know that you're lying here?" But the old man, barely holding back tears, said his wife had died more than 15 years ago, and the relationship with his only daughter didn't work out. Harry was used to speaking openly if he didn't like something. The daughter was irritated by her father's behavior. The only joy in life was his beloved granddaughter Sophia. But in recent years, his daughter flatly forbid them to communicate. Jacob asked Harry for his daughter's address and promised to talk to her. It turned out that the girl lived quite close to the hospital, and the guy tracked her down the same day. Jacob told Sophia about her dying grandfather, adding that he loved her very much and missed her. The old man tearfully thanked Jacob for the joy of seeing his beloved granddaughter. "At least we got to see each other before we died. Now I don't mind dying," Harry cried, holding his granddaughter's hand. But apparently, the companionship of his own granddaughter gave the old man strength, and he lived not a month as the doctors had predicted, but 6 months. His granddaughter visited her grandfather almost every day, and Jacob stopped by on his way there and back on his trip. He was lucky that the company had some kind of contract for a regular supply of building materials to this town, and he started asking for that particular destination. At first, the reason was a dying old man, whom he felt very sorry for. Then, after getting to know his granddaughter, he began to catch himself thinking that he really wanted to see her. The girl turned out to be very kind and outgoing. They easily found common topics of conversation with Jacob, and after meeting only a couple of times, they felt as if they had known each other all their lives. Even when Harry died, Jacob kept coming to this town, and there were strong feelings between him and Sophia. They called each other every day and looked forward to seeing each other. A couple of months after the forester died, Jacob, returning from a trip, took Sophia to his town and introduced her to his parents. That same evening, sitting at the feast table, he proposed to Sophia, which brought tears of joy to his mother's eyes. Jacob's parents really liked Sophia and were happy to have her as their daughter-in-law. The wedding was a modest family affair. After the wedding, they had a table at a small, comfortable cafe where they happily celebrated the event. The newlyweds settled in Jacob's rented apartment, but 6 months later they moved into a new, spacious 2-bedroom apartment taken on a mortgage. They took this step after learning that they would soon become parents, realizing that living with a baby in a 1-room apartment would be cramped. In due time, the couple had a baby boy who was named John. Another 1.5 years later, an exact little copy of Sophia, daughter Emma, was born. The parents could not be more happy about their grandchildren. After all, they already thought that after Amanda's betrayal, their son would never get married. But heaven heard their prayers. In such a short time, they had a beautiful, loving daughter-in-law and 2 wonderful grandchildren. Jim the dog stayed with Jacob and his family. Now the dog faithfully guarded the baby's sleep, crying out for help as soon as one of them woke up.